and we'll have Mr. O'Connell come around the corner here, have a seat. Nice to meet you in person.
Yes, sir.
We chatted with the head coach the day he was officially introduced, but that was, of course, by phone or by special carrier pigeon. And welcome.
Dan, thank you very much. How you guys doing?
We're doing
What'd you
very,
think?
very well. Well, we were saying, my producer / sidekick, Justin Gard, he was watching you because, you know, in the media business, as you know, well, you were a media member. You know
I
this.
was,
We
yes.
analyze everything, even stuff we probably shouldn't. And he's watching you come over here, and he said, this guy, he looks pretty confident right here. He looks like, hey. And I said, well, he's probably saying, what's the big deal being a head coach? They make it sound so difficult. We accomplished everything we wanted to accomplish day one. Are you as confident as that? And you finished early. You finished early today, correct?
Yeah, my biggest thing today was we're obviously on some league-wide rules. They call it the ramp-up period. So we're kind of on a tight clock. Can you get in the work that you need to get in day one while still being, you know, within the confines of the rules? And we actually shaved about 3 minutes off just by guys flying around and practicing really fast. We kept everybody off the ground. We're still just in helmets, which is very similar to what we were in the spring. But obviously, you know, we were doing a lot more kind of lower tempo, jog through type things above that neck work. And so for the guys to come out and play fast, some ones versus ones work, some ones versus twos, and come out pretty clean, we're really excited about it.
So if correct me if I have these numbers wrong, but my understanding is you can have, a team can have as many as 16 padded practices.
Yep.
But you, I think, are choosing 11.
Yep.
Tell us a little bit about your thinking there. What went into that? Why particularly that number?
Yeah, it's unique, too, because of how our schedule worked out. We'll get those full-speeded days, full pad days. We'll be full speed every day, but just those full days, I told the team last night, you know, when we go, we got to go. And people that come out to our facility for training camp, they will feel that. They'll feel that urgency, that energy, to know that those are big-time growth days for our whole team, and we'll do a lot of competitive work then. But with the schedule, we have a Sunday preseason game on the road. So what that does is that gives us an extra day before. But a lot of times with the sports science side of things, you stack too many of those days together, you start to see, you know, guys' numbers really spike, you know, from a total yardage and high-speed yard standpoint. We just want to be able to, you know, ramp it up, then pull it back. And then when we got to go, we got to go. But to get those 11 days being maximized, you really can't, in my opinion, jump on top of these guys with 4 or 5 padded practices in a row. And really the rules kind of hold that back. And if you want to extend, quote-unquote, training camp a little bit further,
sure.
You know, you can catch up on those padded practices on the back end, which we will do towards the 53, and how we'll break up who plays and who doesn't in the preseason. But it's all built on, you know, me really trusting Tyler Williams and our sports science staff to make sure that we're able to evaluate our guys going full speed and what kind of team we want to build. But we want to have all these guys. We want to have every single one of the 53 guys we want on this roster and our practice squad. We want those guys healthy coming out of training camp. And those 2 days against the Niners, they're both padded practices back-to-back, and I can promise you that will be a little bit different than just coming out here against Vikings on Vikings with a physical team like that coming in.
The age-old question, and I've asked this of many coaches over the years, even before things have sort of changed in terms of how much contact is even demanded by coaches, in part for the reason that you just lay out, is it's still football. It's not touch football. It's still tackle football.
Yep.
It's still a very violent game. So how do you factor in hitting that sweet spot between not being stupid and reckless in wearing your players down and getting them prepared for the rigors of a National Football League season and that first game?
Yeah, it's a great question, because when I look at it, that's one of the reasons you go out and you hire an Ed Donatel, Mike Pettin is an assistant head coach. We've got Greg Minuski. We've got Durante. We've got guys that are experienced defensive coaches in this league. Matt Daniels played special teams and was they call him Hat for a reason, because he used to obviously lay the hat when he played. So I've got some coaches that understand, and they used to be in the old NFL where, hey, you were, smacking heads every day and only the strong survive type of thing. And then they've had to transition through that into what we now, deal with from a rule standpoint, but also we understand more. We're able to track more data, and not that data drives everything, but when you have it, if you're not using it as a tool to take care of your football team, I think it's, doing a real disservice to the team. So I rely on those guys, and I challenged our staff last week. I said, I want you guys to really come up with ways, unique ways, to make sure that we're a good tackling football team, no matter how much guys play or don't play in the preseasons to be determined. But I think that's coaching, and I think that's something we really got to hang our hat on, is finding those ways to really teach that technique, teach the fundamentals, teach guys angles, all those things. And then when we do compete and there's places to really see where guys could have made a game-changing tackle, a 3rd and 1, and it might be a tag-off play, but there ain't no way you were making that tackle with the angle you took, and you can coach those things up. And then ultimately in the run game, we're going to rely on a lot of guys that have been doing it a long time. Harrison Smith, Eric Kendricks, Daniil Z. We've got Harrison Phillips and DT in the middle. Jordan Hicks, obviously, there next to EK. So guys that have 100 tackle type players, guys that have made a lot of plays in this league, and rely on them being fresh, ready to go mentally and physically. But then, when it's time to go, like we said last night in our team meeting, we're going.
First practice is in the books. We're at TCO Performance Center chatting with head coach Kevin O'Connell. When you're analyzing sort of where the team you inherited and trying to figure out where you want to go, which is obviously get better than certainly last year and then get into the playoffs and then make a move, would you say it's more important that this team takes another step offensively, or that it needs to take a really big step defensively, based on the fact that this defense, statistically and a lot of other ways, was nowhere near as good as it often had been under the previous regime and Mike Zimmer?
Yeah, I think, we obviously have had a lot of dialogue about what
we apologize for the technical snafu. Very rare these days, but it happens every once in a while. We're chatting with Kevin O'Connell, and you were about, I think, beginning to answer the question about offense improvement versus defensive improvement in terms of moving forward.
Yeah, I was so excited about the answer. I might have took down the whole operation here. But, no, I think, we've had a lot of conversations about what type of football team we're building here. There's a lot to be determined personnel-wise, ultimately what that will be. We have philosophies, in those 3 phases, but ultimately, that's what we do as coaches, is take those philosophies and really figure out how we can highlight players that can help us win football games, and week in and week out in this league, how we're going to win is really, really important to not only figure out as coaches, but deliver that message to our team of what's going to be important to do or maybe don't do this week against that particular team. But whatever has happened with this team in the past, I just know one thing. I know I've got a lot of respect for this organization, and having played this organization multiple times, I know we've got a good roster. I know we've got a good group of players that are hungry to continue to learn our philosophies and our football way of doing things. And then we just continue out throughout the month to really figure out what that looks like. And really the word that hits my brain, Dan, is identity. Like, what is the identity at our core? What does that look like? And it does not have to be like what I've been in the past at other spots. Maybe it will be, maybe it won't. But ultimately this team, the 2022 Vikings, will make that identity up themselves.
I know your job isn't to look back in terms of what took place before here, because it doesn't do you any good other than, I'm sure, look at a lot of tape and a lot of film and maybe learn a lot about the players you still have here. But one of the things that has come up over the offseason is occasionally there's been players, some of them still here, some not, who expressed frustration. They felt that it was a little bit too tight here at times, a little bit too demanding at times in a way that made it difficult for players to relax. The question of the culture of fear, some of that stuff can be oversimplified. But I bring this up because I'm curious, as a coach who's been around now a little bit, did you sense when you came here that you were trying to coach a team that has been emotionally wounded? And in terms of the mental side, is that something you were conscious of, that you observed, and has been part of how you've decided to go forward? Or what do you make of that whole issue?
Yeah, I definitely would not say that. Though first thing I noticed, really from day one, getting a chance to first have dialogue with our players, especially our leadership. We've got a leadership group that I've been in pretty constant contact with since really day one. And what I noticed is, and very quickly, I feel like we've got great leadership on this team. I feel like we've got a good locker room. The foundation of understanding kind of where we wanted to go from a culture standpoint, regardless of what it was before. I was not here for that. What I do know is I feel very strongly about how I want our building to operate. I feel strongly about how I want to empower players and our leadership to have that kind of ownership over our team. And there really shouldn't be much to have fear of or worry about or have anxiety when the communication is at a premium. I tell our team and my team, I tell them what the expectation is. Do we go out and reach that expectation? Do we not? And if we don't, we got to be able to have real conversations to fix those things and then reset, reevaluate, and go try to win football games. So ultimately, I just believe in building up a player ownership type of atmosphere, and you do that and you build that culture and all those things that some folks may not think matter. I can tell you right now, when you start hitting the adversity of a 17-game NFL season, you rely on that. You don't rely on pointing fingers or starting to pull apart from the seams. You bond closer and you rely on that culture, and it's really tested in this league week in and week out, and you're ultimately going to find out. You won't know until that adversity comes. I've told our team many times, I feel great about what we've been able to do early on. I feel great about the transition as we've started training camp, but we will ultimately find out, like every team in this league does, week in and week out in this league, what we are and who we are.
Even with what you are, the atmosphere you are attempting to set up here, do you expect to get tested by players? Is it still human nature that players are going to test you? Because there's a part of this, as you say, that is also about you being honest enough with them, no matter what you're trying to set up in terms of happy feelings, in terms of we ain't getting this done. This is not going to work for us. If we want to get to where we want to go, that we've got to do this better, and that better.
Yeah, and I think the natural reaction hearing about words like culture and hearing about words like positive work environment is happy feelings. And that's very, very, you're absolutely right to think that. But what I would challenge people to understand is once you've built that culture, once you've had the relationships and you build it up so they know who you are every single day, you're the consistent leader out in front, good times, bad times, they know who you are. Guess what you can do? You can coach them really hard. And when they feel like they're holding each other accountable, we can hold them accountable, and vice versa. They can hold us accountable to the things that we say, how we're coaching them, what we're asking them to do. And then ultimately, if we all have that ownership, we all look inward when things do get difficult, I can promise you, your culture is where you want it to be.
What did you appreciate from a coach when you were a player, and what did you tend to reject? And how much did that factor into the approach that you're attempting to take?
I appreciated something that's very simple, and that's honesty. And I think you don't want to throw that around in a world where you do have to cut a roster from 90 to 53. You do have to have really hard conversations. That's why the conversations you have long before that matter, when you lay out objectives for not just your team, not just your offense, your defense, your special teams, but on an individual level. I've challenged our position coaches to really look closely at what individual players on our team need to do to make our football team. And ultimately, once we've made our football team, what the roles on these teams on this team looks like for how we're going to best win football games. Because ultimately, the 53 guys we take into that first game at home against Green Bay are going to be the guys we believe give us the best chance to win football games. And that decision will be made week in and week out, who's active, who's not. And sometimes those are really tough conversations, but the honesty that you look a guy in the eye and you're willing to do that all comes back to the foundation that you build from really April on. And then ultimately, the second part of your question was, if you can remind me.
I don't even remember. Well, I guess what you accepted and rejected and how much it played into the approach you're taking.
Absolutely, and I think that's the beauty of when I look back at my football journey. I've been able to be blessed to be around a lot of different kind of coaches. When you really peel back and you look at it, a lot of similar characteristics, a lot of different ways to do it, a lot of different ways to motivate a team, to challenge a team, to get the best out of a team. But ways that I've been able to kind of absorb and make my own, because ultimately authenticity and honesty are the things that I want to live by coaching this team, and it's going to get hard to do that at times with the nature of this league, but I'm pretty steadfast in maintaining that.
We're chatting with the Vikings head coach Kevin O'Connell about a lot of good stuff. You guys last year in LA obviously got a lot of good stuff out of a quarterback. You went and got him,
yep.
And you challenged him to make some really tough plays. Sometimes he failed. There were a couple of pick sixes I remember in there, but a lot of times he succeeded, especially at the moment of truth. So when you look back on that, how can you apply that to here? In other words, what did you get out of him, you think, and what do you need to get out of number 8 to take it to that next step so that you guys aren't only top 10 in a lot of yardage, a lot of categories, but also top 10 in scoring, which yep. I don't believe this team was. How do the two things are the two things connected, do you think, or are they two completely different kinds of quarterbacks?
Well, I think you get two guys that have played a lot of football. When I was first got to be around either one of those guys, and really I was first around Kirk years ago and had that relationship. But in regards to last year, when you make a decision as an organization to make a change at that position and go get a guy, we identified Matthew as somebody we really thought we could build something around, really studying what he had done over a long period of time in some different systems. We were able to kind of evolve and change and still remain true to what the foundation of the offense was and how it would best help us win football games. And ultimately with Kirk, that's the plan. We're hard at work right now transitioning our offensive systems to what we're going to be here. And it may look a lot like what we did in LA at times, and then other times it might be unrecognizable to even people I coached with in Los Angeles, because ultimately we're going to do what we think gives us advantages. We're going to use our tools that we build in this offense to apply pressure to defenses how we see fit, and that can change week in and week out. It can be consistent throughout the season, but I can tell you that we're going to use our personnel. We've evaluated this roster. We're going to put guys in position throughout this training camp to kind of see what they're capable of, multi-versatile roles for some guys. And then ultimately, the answer is, does this help the quarterback play well? Does this help the O-line, hold up against a lot of really good pass rushers? And then ultimately, how are you using your playmakers to fit that all together?
What is acceptable risk by a quarterback in your system?
Yeah, I think we build a system where a lot of times, the number one question in our passing game is we're trying to build things so that we can, have a quarterback play with comfort and worry about timing and rhythm, and not so much where am I starting my read, where am I against this coverage, I'm going to do this, against that coverage, I'm going to do this. We try to build a system with answers, and then quarterbacks just have to drop back in rhythm, with great technique, fundamentals, poise in the pocket, and go through progressions that we try to define, to help them eliminate, get through progressions, throw completions, put the ball in play. You guys will hear me say a lot because I do think as dynamic as defenses are in this league, I still think, you mentioned it already, they still have to tackle in space. And if we can get people in space with a good matchup, that's a bonus. That's the icing on top. But obviously we're going to try to build it in a way where that quarterback, it all plays through his rhythm, his eyes, and running the football does help, as a side note there.
Well, that's the funny thing, because I think people assume because McVay is young, I don't know who I was talking to about this the other day, that, well, then by that definition, he doesn't ever, he's bored with the ground game, isn't interested in it, even is more liberal in terms of the risks that he takes in terms of game management, which I don't think, you could speak to it because you were there, is necessarily true, right? I mean, there's always going to be a balance, and I don't think you're bored with the running game, are you?
No, and I think the game management decisions, how you win football games, it might not be, how you register statistics and
right.
Fantasy football. Teams out there might be upset sometimes, but you have to navigate through 4 quarters of football games in this NFL league that, it takes decisions being made out of the best interest of the team. Not any individual player, not any individual, one side of the ball over the other. When we have an advantage in one phase of football on offense or defense, we're going to schematically play that game and make decisions based upon that. And if it doesn't work out, that's on us, and that's on us as a team and our players and our coaching staff to understand we made a decision. We wanted to play the game a certain way, we did, and it did not work out. But you have to go through that process, and that's where situational football comes into play, understanding who you're playing, where you're playing. What's the rhythm of the game going like, where possible momentum swings could be really life and death in a football game nowadays in the NFL, and then how you control the clock, both the end of the first half, the end of games, how you're going to, if you're winning, how you're going to put it away. If you're not, how you're going to go chase that victory down, and whatever you need to do that, you got to be willing to make those decisions.
2 last things for Kevin O'Connell. I've kept you too long. I appreciate the time.
It's all good.
Vikings coach. You mentioned, this was a challenge for this club. This is a team in terms of at end of halves and at end of games. Part of the reason they ended up with the record they did was they didn't make enough plays, and that, of course, often determines the difference between good teams and okay teams or even mediocre teams. So everybody now, I think, out there believes, well, we've got 1 million coaches, so you need to have a game manager coach, that there's a guy who basically then is a tool that the head coach can use to help decide things like what the analytics suggest on whether to go for it on 4th down here, how to use your timeouts, How do you navigate all of that? Do you have somebody you've designated for that? Is that ultimately your job? How are you handling that part of it?
I do. We hired a kid named Ryan Cordell, and really I shouldn't say kid, but we hired him away from Cleveland. I had worked with him in the past when he was responsible for that role at some other places, and he's fantastic. He's very, very intelligent, has a great way about understanding how to deliver that data, because the one thing, two things about analytics, right? Yeah, I am absolutely a fan of using that data as a tool, but a couple questions. What does that data come from? Where is that collected from? Who is determining the different variables in that? And ultimately, that's where I think week in and week out in this league, they change. If you're a team that thinks you can just use the chart and go by the chart, live and die by the chart, well, there may be a quarterback on the other side that has something to do with saying,
yep.
With what that may mean. And ultimately, not that you ever play scared. It may be time to hit the gas at times, but ultimately, Ryan will have a huge role in that. And I also think, a guy like Mike Pettin, there's a reason why he's here. He's made those decisions before. He's been a head coach on the other side of the ball, which I think is really important, because now he can really play some of that yin and yang with me of making good decisions for our team when maybe I know, there's a look out there. We got ourselves one. I can call this play right now and end this thing right now, but is that the right thing to do for our team, or is that the right thing to do for JJ to score another touchdown? That's where I need to be able to really be able to oversee and rely on my conversations. And quite honestly, Dan, some of those conversations happen long before Sunday at 12 o'clock at US Bank Stadium. They happen throughout the week. We'll have meetings to prepare our mindset for what type of game. Can we set those variables, at least the ones that we know will not change, the who, the when, the what, and then obviously as that game plays out, how are we playing, what are we doing well, or like in the Super Bowl, we thought we would run the ball well in the Super Bowl. We did not. They had a great plan to take away our run game. Then we lose Odell Beckham, and ultimately we had to rely on a different variation that, I'm not sure, even Rams fans recognized in the second half of that game, but it required us to adapt and do what we had to do to win that football game, or at least give ourselves a chance to score 23 points, which was enough to win that game. So ultimately, maybe it's not about the stats. Maybe it's not about scoring the most points all the time. Obviously, that helps you win a football game, but playing each one of those games as its own and making really good decisions, I'll be learning throughout. Let's make no mistake about it. I by no means have all the answers, but I'm going to put in every bit of work that I have to do, and with our coaching staff, and more importantly, teach our players so that when those moments come, we can eliminate some anxiety, eliminate the clutter in their minds, so they pretty much know what's coming.
Last question to that end. How do you prepare, or how are you preparing to call plays? Right?
Yeah, it's something that I got a chance to do quite a bit, not really in the game setting in LA, but Sean really, I was able to develop as a coach there. I was able to do it very, people don't understand that I obviously when I was able to do it late in Washington,
right,
kind of out of necessity when a change was made there, with a lot of young players and playing 4 or 5 rookies at the skill positions at one time. I learned a ton that year, and that was maybe as big, if not greater than, the last couple of years being around Sean McVay day in and day out, minute to minute, of how you build plans and how you go about taking that plan to the game. So ultimately, your quarterback is comfortable with the plan, but your team, all 11 guys out there, understand exactly what to do, how to do it, and then how are we applying pressure? How are we in this day and age, how can we be in attack mode? That's one of our football philosophy core characteristics, is we want to attack, and we want to be in attack mode, and that looks like a lot of different things to the common eye, but we're going to use all those tools that we have.
Appreciate the time very much.
Yeah,
good to have you.
Dan.
I hope we chat sometime soon down the line.
Yeah,
good luck.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Kevin O'Connell, the Vikings coach, day one of Vikings Training Camp. First practices are in the books. They got done early, and he was kind enough to give us a lot of time. We appreciate your patience too, because we had a little bit of a glitch. Thank you so much. No, I don't think it was. But it helps that you've been in the media. So to that extent, probably you're even used to it. So thanks again.